In the heart of Constantinople, where the Bosporus Strait gleamed under the summer sun, stood the magnificent palace of the Ottoman Sultan. Its sprawling gardens were a testament to the empire's wealth and power, filled with exotic plants and flowers from across the known world. Among them were tulips, those regal blossoms that had captured the fancy of the Sultan's court. And it was here that our story begins. A young woman named Leyla steps off the swaying caravan, her gaze immediately drawn to the palace before her. Behind her, merchants unloaded bales of cloth, silks, and spices, their voices echoing in the vast courtyard. But Leyla could hear none of them. Her ears were attuned to the melody of water cascading over stone, a gentle symphony serenading the visitor's arrival. Following the sound, she found herself at the edge of a formal garden, a sea of color stretching as far as she could see. Rows upon rows of jewel-toned blooms unfurled beneath the cloudless sky, each one a masterpiece of nature's art. Crimson, sapphire, emerald, every conceivable hue was represented there, swaying gently in the warm breeze. The air itself trembled with the scent of rich earth and crushed petals, an instinctive lullaby for any newcomer's nerves. Her escort, a wiry man with shrewd eyes, broke the silence. "Welcome to the Seraglio, Leyla," he said, his voice raspy like worn velvet. "You have brought many fine things to the Sultan's court, but none finer than what you carry in that satchel." He gestured to the small bag slung across her shoulder, the heirloom seeds entrusted to her by her family, famed cultivators of rare blooms back in their homeland. As dusk settled, casting long shadows across the palace grounds, the escort led her deeper into the gardens. Lantern light began to dance across the petals, painting fleeting strokes of gold and crimson on the canvas of twilight. The scene was both enchanting and daunting, promising wonder, but also hinting at unspoken challenges ahead. Following winding paths that meandered between flower beds, they arrived at a structure of white marble. Water flowed gracefully from its fountains, feeding the thirsty soil and adding to the intoxicating symphony of sound and scent. This was the palace conservatory, a tribute to the Sultan's insatiable curiosity about the natural world. Within its cool embrace, nestled against crystal-clear pools, grew a menagerie of exotic plants and flowers from distant lands. Crimson poppies brushed against delicate ferns, while vibrant begonias nestled beside stately palms. The very air hummed with the energy of life, buzzing with bees and fluttering with the wings of butterflies. As Leyla stepped inside, a shiver ran down her spine. It was not merely the coolness of the conservatory that caused this reaction, but something more, an inexplicable anticipation of the journey that lay before her. The Sultan's horticulturist, a man whose name echoed with legendary tales of botanical discovery, stood waiting for her in the center of the conservatory. His attire, a harmonious blend of Eastern elegance and Western refinement, spoke of his status and cultivated an air of authority. His eyes, keen and inquisitive, glistened with excitement upon seeing the young woman who had traveled so far to grace his Sultan-esque gardens with her presence. With him stood the Sultan's son, a curious young man whose gaze was as sharp as his father's, though his demeanor was relaxed, betraying a hint of mischief in his eyes. At their side was a eunuch, his face weathered like ancient parchment, bearing silent witness to countless seasons and secrets within these palace walls. Leyla, daughter of Idris, renowned for your skill in cultivating rare flora, boomed the horticulturist, his voice resonating with admiration. We have heard tales of your prowess in bringing forth the rarest blooms in the land. We eagerly await the unveiling of the treasures you carry. His gaze, sharp and penetrating, swept over the gardenia tucked securely beneath her cloak. In that satchel, nestled amidst layers of protective cloth, slept precious seeds, each holding the potential for a new marvel in the Sultan's garden. Leyla's response was a simple curtsy, her voice soft yet steady as she replied, "My esteemed horticulturist, the Sultan's reputation precedes him. Your gardens are spoken of with reverence in every corner of the empire. To contribute even a small bloom to such magnificence is an honor for me." She carefully adjusted the satchel across her shoulder, its weight suddenly feeling heavier with the anticipation of what was to come. As the conversation continued, the horticulturist's eyes never left the gardenia in her hands. His eagerness to inspect the precious cargo was palpable, a hunger for discovery that mirrored his Sultan's own insatiable curiosity. After polite inquiries about her journey, he gestured towards a secluded corner of the conservatory, veiled by cascading vines and flowering shrubs. "We have prepared a special place for your blooms, Leyla, there, amidst the finest soil and purest water. Your gardenia will awaken and reveal their secrets." The young woman inclined her head in gratitude, her steps purposeful as she walked towards the designated spot. Each rustle of leaves and gurgle of water felt like a whispered secret, amplifying the sense of intrigue that had become her constant companion since arriving in the city. With the gardenia safely secured in its new home, the horticulturist turned his keen gaze back to Leyla. "Tell us now, what tales have your travels brought? What wonders have you seen beyond our mighty empire?" His question, like a skilled gardener, tended to the conversation, guiding it towards topics that would help unveil the character of his guest. Leyla knew that her responses would be carefully weighed, not just for their content, but also for the way they revealed her understanding of the world. As the night deepened, the conservatory's cool embrace offered respite from the city's bustling energy. With the Sultan's heir and his attendants now at her side, the atmosphere shifted, becoming more intimate, more charged with anticipation for the journey ahead. Leyla, ever poised and graceful, wove tales of bustling marketplaces, vibrant bazaars and caravans laden with exotic wares. She spoke of the changing landscapes that had welcomed her along the way, from the sun-drenched hills of her homeland to the wind-swept plains beyond. But it was when she described the people she had encountered, their customs and traditions, that her narrative truly blossomed. She painted vivid pictures of merchants from distant lands, scholars seeking wisdom, and artisans displaying their skills. The Sultan's son leaned closer, his earlier playfulness replaced by an earnest curiosity. The heir, captivated by her stories, saw in Leyla's tales not just adventures, but glimpses into different ways of life, different perspectives on the world they all inhabited. Each word she spoke was like a brushstroke on a canvas, creating a masterpiece of storytelling that held the audience spellbound. The horticulturist nodded sagely, recognizing in Leyla's narratives not just the qualities of a gifted storyteller, but also the makings of a true ambassador. Her ability to connect with people, to appreciate their cultures, and convey their stories with such finesse was a testament to her character and the upbringing that had shaped her into the remarkable young woman she was. As the night drew to a close, the heir, his mind still vibrant with the day's events and Leyla's stories, turned to her, his eyes reflecting the flickering lamplight. "Tomorrow," he began, his voice echoing with the promise of a new day, "we shall venture into the heart of the Sultan's domains. You will see wonders that will stir your spirit and challenge your understanding." He paused, gauging her reaction to the veiled invitation that lay within his words. "Are you ready, Leyla, to delve deeper into the mysteries that await us?" Leyla met his gaze steadily, the fire of adventure kindling in her eyes. "I am ready," she affirmed, her voice echoing with the quiet confidence of one who has prepared for a long journey. bring forth whatever wonders and challenges lie ahead. I am here to learn and to share in the Sultan's grand pursuits. As the last vestiges of daylight surrendered to the velvety embrace of night, the heir, the horticulturist, and Leyla made their way to a grand reception hall. Here, amidst flickering candlelight and the murmur of animated conversations, they were greeted by figures of influence and intrigue, each with their own designs and secrets. Amidst the swirling fabrics and animated discussions, Leyla found herself ensconced in a world of intricate social cues and veiled agendas. The Sultan's court, a microcosm of the empire itself, was a place where power was measured in subtle glances and whispered words. She stood gracefully beside the heir, listening intently as courtiers wove tales of daring expeditions and far-off lands. Their words, often laced with double meanings, hinted at the complex web of alliances and rivalries that shaped the empire's destiny. With every passing moment, the stakes seemed to rise, weaving a tapestry of intrigue that threatened to envelop her in its intricate folds. Yet Leyla remained steadfast, her composure unwavering amidst the swirling currents of the court. As the evening deepened, the heir excused himself, leaving Leyla in the capable company of the horticulturist, who now took on the role of guide, not just through the gardens of the Sultan, but through the labyrinthine world of the imperial court. "Tomorrow," he said, his voice low, betraying none of the thoughts racing behind his steady gaze, "you will see the extent of the Sultan's obsession with the tulip. His gardens are but a prelude to what lies hidden within the palace walls." His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications, serving as a reminder that their journey was far from over. They had merely begun to unravel the threads of a mystery that lay at the very heart of the empire. And so the tale continues, promising a journey that is as much a test of wits and courage as it is a testament to the enduring allure of the tulip. For within the opulent confines of the Sultan's palace, where beauty and danger intertwined, Leyla's journey was far from over. A Chronicle of Ottoman Tulip Cultivation. Chapter 2, The Master's Greenhouse. Inside a vaulted glass house, warmed by subterranean vents, Master Gardener Aziz welcomes his apprentice for the day, Leyla. He scrutinizes her seeds with a practiced eye. He murmurs, "You bring us 3 varieties from Iznik, but why only 3? What happened to the rest?" "They were yielding," Master Leyla says, holding out the remaining seed packet. "No room for them in my saddlebags." The Master Gardener strokes his beard, considering, "Yielding is good, but we do not rely on luck or chance. We rely on lineage, on hue stability, on the cunning art of bulb preservation." Leyla swallows, suddenly afraid. "I heard tell, Master," she says, "that tulips were wild once, uncultivated, unbridled. Do you think it was always so?" "Some say," Aziz replies, glancing at the unopened packets, "that tulips are like women, best left unbridled. Others say they're like wine, better with restraint." "Ah, but where would the poetry be then?" He unwraps the first packet and holds up a dark red bulb, its edges tinged with purple. This one comes from a strain cultivated by the emperor's own consort, Sultan Validhatis Turhan. They say she was as beautiful as the rising sun, which may be true or false. But what is true is that these flowers were cherished by her alone until now. Their lineage has been jealously guarded for decades. Leyla runs a fingertip along the bulb's curve. It feels smooth, hard, alive. What if they were truly wild? She asks, uncontained, unrestrained. She takes a small bulb from the pack and tucks it into her sleeve. Aziz sighs. "In time, you will see how it is done, how the most untamable souls can be coaxed to bloom in the confines of our garden walls." For now, I only ask that you do not be reckless with the gifts you have been given. The fate of empires hangs on our success here." With that cryptic warning, he leads her deeper into the labyrinthine greenhouse. Sunlight filters through the glass ceiling, painting moving mosaics on the ground and illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Each section of the greenhouse is devoted to a different phase of cultivation, from propagation to forcing. And beyond them all, stretching as far as Leyla can see, are endless rows of carefully labeled pots containing bulbs ready to be planted. Beside each pot is a small brass plate on which a single letter is engraved. "Why is it done?" she asks, gesturing to the markings. "Is it some kind of code?" Aziz smiles. "Ah, you are quick to catch on. It is a code indeed, but one that only a trained eye can read. Those markings are directions. If you had eyes only for the flowers, you would miss their meaning entirely. Come." He walks her through the greenhouse, pointing out the intricate details of each variety, explaining the differences between the simple folk who grow food crops and the elite few who cultivate tulips. Those farmers, he says, using a Turkish word that means husbandman, they plant and they harvest. Yes, but they do not take the time to understand their fields. They don't see the difference between a healthy leaf and a diseased one. They don't know how to make a barren field yield abundantly. They don't know how to identify the potential in a young plant. All they know is how to follow the seasons. We, on the other hand, are masters of our craft. We are artists of the soil. We know how to make an old bulb bloom again. We know how to read the language of leaves. And when we plant a seed, we know exactly what it will become. As the morning progresses, Aziz shares stories about the history of the tulip, tales passed down from master gardener to apprentice over many years. He tells her about the great conquests of the Ottomans, how they swept across 3 continents and brought the tulip with them as a trophy of war, a symbol of wealth and power. But those wars, he says, his voice growing distant, they cost us dearly. Can you imagine, Leyla, a world without tulips, a world without beauty? When the men went off to fight, we hid our bulbs in the ground, covered them with rocks, and prayed that they would survive the bombardment. When they came back, they found a world in ruins, but the tulips bloomed anyway, stronger than ever. That is why we grow them, child, not just for ourselves, but for everyone, so that even in the darkest times, there is still something to look forward to. His eyes, though, tell a different story. Leyla sees the pain behind his cloudy gaze, the fear that lurks in his furrowed brows. He doesn't want to talk about those days. She senses the ones when the gardens were bombed, the ones when people died. Instead, he shows her how to inspect a bulb, how to feel its firmness, how to check its roots. He teaches her how to distinguish a healthy plant from one that is sick or infested, how to prune the dead or dying leaves, how to feed the soil. You must listen to the plants, child, he says, kneeling beside a pot. They will tell you what they need. You just have to learn their language. And so, Leyla spends her days learning the secrets of the greenhouse. Watching the tulips grow and change, she tends to them, waters them, and listens to their silent songs. She watches the master gardener at work, trying to understand his every move, memorizing his every word. She asks him questions about the plants, about their history, about their future, and he answers patiently, sharing his knowledge freely. She helps him sort through the bulbs, matching the labels to the pots, checking the soil, planting new seeds. And as she works, she feels a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging, a sense of hope. That night, Leyla lies awake in her bed, her mind racing with images of the greenhouse, the scent of damp earth clinging to her clothes. She pulls out the small bulb she took from the pack, turning it over in her hands. It's just a bulb, she knows, a simple plant that grows in the ground, yet it feels heavy in her palm, charged with a strange energy. In the darkness, it looks different, more precious, more mysterious. Suddenly, the master gardener's words echo in her head. You must listen to the plants, child. They will tell you what they need. You just have to learn their language. She closes her eyes, trying to hear their whispers, their songs, their stories. And as she drifts off to sleep, she dreams of soil layered like silk. When Leyla wakes up the next morning, she feels refreshed, renewed, ready to face another day in the greenhouse. But as she steps outside, she notices something different, something she couldn't see before. The sky is overcast, the air is cold, and the wind is strong. She shivers, pulling her cloak tighter around her shoulders. It's going to rain, she says aloud, surprised by the tremor in her own voice. A single tear rolls down her cheek, escaping the confines of her veil. It's not just the weather, she realizes. It's the weight of what she has seen and heard, the burden of what she now knows. She is no longer a simple girl, she is a witness. She has seen the past, the present, the future. She has seen the life and death of a nation. And she knows that the only way to stop the cycle is to break the chain. Suddenly, she hears a commotion coming from the greenhouse. She runs toward the noise, pushing open the door and rushing inside. She finds the master gardener kneeling beside a pot, his face buried in his hands. "Master," she asks, her voice trembling, "what's wrong?" He looks up, his eyes filled with despair. "Oh, child," he says, "it's too late. The blight has reached the heart of our garden. There is nothing we can do now." He rises slowly, his shoulders slumped, his gaze fixed on the ground. "The end is here, Leyla. The end is here." As he speaks, she sees the truth. The plants are wilting, their leaves turning black and withering away. The bulbs are rotting, their skins splitting open and oozing a foul liquid. The flowers are falling, their petals dropping to the ground and dissolving into mud. Everything she has learned, everything she has seen, everything she has loved, is dying. She wants to help, but she doesn't know how. She wants to save the garden, but she can't. She feels helpless, hopeless, trapped. Then she remembers the small bulb in her sleeve, the one she took from the pack. Maybe it's not too late, she thinks. Maybe there is still something she can do. Maybe she can plant that bulb, give it water, wait for it to grow and bloom and bring some beauty back into this dying world. Maybe that's all she can do, but maybe it's enough. Outside, the rain begins to fall, washing away the dirt and the decay, making room for new life to sprout. Inside, Leyla takes off her cloak, revealing the small bulb nestled in her sleeve. She kneels beside the dead plants, feeling the wet soil between her fingers. She closes her eyes, listening to the rhythm of the rain, and she plants the bulb deep in the ground. Then she covers it with dirt, pats it down, and waters it with a small vial of rainwater. She stands up, wiping the soil from her hands, and looks at the grave she has just made. It's just a small bulb, she knows, a single seed of hope in a field of despair, but it's all she has to offer, and maybe that's enough. As the rain falls harder, she turns and walks away, leaving the greenhouse behind her, not knowing that she has just saved it. The Sultan's gardens were justly famous across the known world. But while his gardeners grew flowers for the sheer love of it, the Sultan himself had a more calculating view of his beloved tulips. You see, he was convinced that these flowers, so favored by God, could be a key to his dynasty's future. How? Well, as we heard last time, the tulips produced by his prized beds were starting to get really weird. They were growing more and more petals, which meant they were producing larger and larger blooms. And in the Ottoman Empire, bigger was definitely better. Bigger flowers meant greater prestige for the Ottomans. So, with every new multi-petaled bloom, his courtiers would go wild. Each new flower was cause for celebration. To them, creating ever more extravagant blossoms was a divine calling. They believed the Almighty was favoring them by giving them the most beautiful flowers in the world. And if they could just find a way to make those flowers even showier, their glory would be assured across Europe and perhaps all of Christendom. But that glory was going to have to wait. Our story picks up with the arrival of a weary merchant at the imperial palace in Istanbul. He has traveled a long and winding road from the fabled cities of Persia and Kashmir, where apparently some very special tulips are grown. In his hands, he bears a slender wooden box, and inside it is a precious cargo, one bulb of each variety of the rarest tulips in the East. The merchants tell the Sultan that in Persia and Kashmir, cultivating these tulips is an art unto itself. And now the Sultan's name is being whispered in those faraway lands, because the people there have heard tales of the glorious, otherworldly gardens he has cultivated here in Istanbul. And so they have sent him the best examples of their craft, hoping to learn from the master. News of this delivery quickly reaches the ears of the head gardener, Ahmed, a man who takes his floral duties very seriously. His whole life has been devoted to the pursuit of the perfect tulip. And for him, the flowers aren't just beautiful, they're practically divine. He sees in them a reflection of the divine order of the universe. He believes it's his duty to tend them with the utmost care. If only he could figure out how to make them even more spectacular. That would bring him untold glory and, by extension, glory to the Sultan and the Empire. Ah, but what does the Sultan say? Well, he is delighted. Of course, no ruler wants to hear that his gardens are second to none. And yet, somehow, there is always room for improvement. And so the Sultan decides to form a committee to receive and catalogue the new bulbs. Naturally, he puts his favorite daughter, the quick-witted and curious Leyla, in charge. She might not know it yet, but her life is about to change. And while Leyla is happy to help her father, she's got no idea how important this task will become. You see, when the box is opened, the first thing that strikes her is the lack of flowers. Instead, she finds a collection of hard, smooth bulbs, small enough to fit into the palm of her hand. Her father, the Sultan, peers inside, then looks up at the merchant and demands to know where are the flowers, where are the plants. The merchant bows low before the Sultan and explains that these bulbs are dormant. Now, though he assures them the bulbs can and will sprout, the timing is up to nature, not the whims of mortals. Even in the finest gardens in Persia and Kashmir, they may sit patiently in the ground for weeks, sometimes months, waiting for the right moment to begin their slow, steady growth. Leyla feels frustrated, but also intrigued. There must be some way, she thinks, to force the process along. She turns back to the merchant and asks, how do we know which ones will grow large flowers? She knows that size matters. After all, that's what everyone has been talking about lately. The merchant smiles and says, oh, that is easy. Each bulb carries its story within. All you need to do is look closely and you will see. He shows her how the scars left on the bulb by the leaves still attached to it form patterns that reveal a tale of how the plant has grown and where it came from. As Leyla traces these lines, she begins to feel like an archaeologist uncovering the secrets of some long-forgotten civilization. This bulb has traveled all the way from the mountains of Kashmir, crossing deserts and seas to end up here in the Sultan's garden. And now she is tasked with understanding its journey, taking stock of the plants the Sultan has already grown and making room for these newcomers. Over the next few days, she catalogues each specimen's markings and origin story, recording the number of ridges and valleys, the color and shape of the outer leaves, even the patterns formed by the edges of the petals. She becomes utterly engrossed in her work, living for the moments when she can study the collection. Leyla has always loved flowers, but now she sees them in a whole new light. For her, the hunt for the perfect tulip has turned into an obsession. It's something she wants to share with her father, but she senses that he is too preoccupied with his own schemes to notice. And what are those schemes, you ask? Well, soon after the new bulbs arrive, the Sultan summons his top advisors. They gather in the throne room, and he announces his plan to hold a great contest. He wants to see who can produce the largest, showiest flower. The prize, of course, will be immense. The winner gets to graft a new bulb onto any existing plant, and the Sultan will personally award the winning gardener with a noble title and a sack of gold. It's not the sort of competition Leyla's father would have organized even a few months ago. Now, though, the entire affair seems almost desperate. You see, the Sultan is getting older, and as he grows older, he's starting to feel the weight of his legacy. He wants his empire to be remembered as the greatest in the world, and he thinks his tulips might be the key. If only he could produce a flower of unprecedented size, a bloom so grand that it defies belief, that would make his gardens famous across Europe. Then people would flock here from all over the known world to see them. But back in Leyla's corner of the palace, she's still poring over her notes when a sudden thought strikes her like a bolt of lightning. The merchant was right, she realizes. Each bulb holds its story. By studying these patterns, she might be able to understand how these flowers grew, and that means she could potentially influence their future, ensuring that they produce the largest, showiest flowers imaginable. She races to the greenhouse to test her theory. To her delight, it works. The patterns on the bulbs give her clues as to the variety and size of the flower, how many petals it will produce, and how fast it will grow. Leyla is elated. Not only has she discovered a way to accelerate the growth of the new flowers, she can also use her knowledge of the bulbs to influence the breeding process. But as she studies the collection, she finds a big problem. There are lots of varieties here, but only a handful of them carry the genes needed to produce truly giant blooms. And to complicate things further, she can't seem to find a way to force these genes to appear. She spends weeks poring over her notes, but to no avail. Leyla is devastated. Could her father's dream really be in jeopardy? Would the secret to growing the ultimate tulip actually be beyond her grasp? Weeks turn into months. The contest is announced and takes place, and despite all of Leyla's efforts, her father's gardens fail to produce anything even close to the legendary flowers he dreams of. With each failed attempt, the Sultan grows more despondent. He starts to believe that his dynasty's fate is sealed. Perhaps he'll go down in history as a great ruler, but never as the man who created the most magnificent tulips in the world. Then Leyla has a breakthrough. She remembers that the merchant mentioned that grafting these bulbs requires patience measured in months, not days. Could it be that her efforts so far have been in vain, because she has ungiven the plants enough time? Was the answer to the Sultan's dreams lying dormant all along? Leyla tends to the gardens day and night, making sure the bulbs are watered and well cared for. She knows it will be months before the plants emerge from the ground, and she isn't sure the Sultan will have the patience to stick around and see it through. Still, she's determined to try, and so Leyla waits. She tends to the gardens, watching day after day as the bulbs slowly begin to sprout. She doesn't know it yet, but the fate of the Sultan's dynasty Not to mention the future of her own family will hinge on her ability to coax these exotic plants into bloom. Will she succeed where so many others have failed? Find out next time on a chronicle of Ottoman tulip cultivation. Hey there, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. The wind is bitter tonight, but the air in the hothouses is warm and sweet with the smell of ripening fruit. Leyla walks among the arched lattice, admiring the blossoms that perfume the night. They're beautiful, these gardens, a testament to human ingenuity, an oasis of beauty in this rugged landscape. But Leyla knows there is more here than meets the eye. Beneath the parterre of tulips and the orderly rows of vegetables, there's a hidden world, one she can sense stirring beneath the surface. Her companions for the evening, Halal and Ibrahim, seem unaware of this. They stroll arm in arm, sharing jokes and gossip. Leyla smiles politely when she hears them, but she cannot shake the feeling that something has been awakened in her since her arrival at the palace. Something stirs in the gardens, something like magic. She came to the imperial palace in Istanbul to learn the art of gardening from the Sultan's personal gardener, a master of his craft. So it was said, but Leyla feels as though she has stumbled upon a secret society. Not only are the gardeners secretive about their techniques, whispering in ways that make her feel unwelcome, but the very soil they tend seems to hold its breath, guarding buried secrets. And then there's Mustafa, the Sultan's favorite gardener, a man whose touch seems to command the flowers themselves. When he speaks, the others listen intently, and when he smiles, his eyes crinkle at the corners in a way that suggests a lifetime of shared secrets. Mustafa is the key to unlocking the mysteries of the gardens, Leyla thinks, and she will find a way to win his trust. But first, she must venture deeper into the belly of the beast, into the underbelly of the gardens where the earth is turned. The sun beats down on the soil as Leyla kneels beside the open trench. With calloused hands, the veteran gardeners are carefully blending layers of loam, crushed marble and volcanic ash, each ingredient adding its unique properties to the mix. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. Leyla watches as one of the gardeners, his face weathered and etched with lines, dips his finger into a pile of freshly excavated soil. He holds it up to his eye, examining it closely. Then, without washing his hands, he reaches into another pile of soil and takes a small taste. His eyes, she notices, are stained with years of working the earth. "What are you doing?" Leyla asks, unable to contain her curiosity any longer. The gardener startles, then looks up at her with a mixture of amusement and annoyance. Testing the pH, he says simply, then returns to his task. "But why not wash your hands first?" Leyla persists, confused by what she's witnessing. "This is how we do things here," the gardener replies with a shrug. "There is no need for cleanliness when it comes to the soil. We are its servants." His words hang in the air, and Leyla realizes that she is intruding on something sacred. These men have a deep connection to the soil, a bond that she does not understand. She watches them work in silence for a while, taking in the rhythm of their movements, the way they seem to know instinctively what the soil needs. As the hours pass, Leyla's frustration grows. She wants to help, to contribute to this vital work, but she feels like an outsider looking in. She wants to ask questions, but she knows that she would be interrupting the flow of their work. So she sits quietly, listening to the whispers of the soil, trying to learn from their every word and gesture. One of the gardeners, Ibrahim, Leyla thinks, notices her struggle. He approaches her, his eyes kind and his steps light. "You want to help us? Then let me show you." He extends a hand to her, and Leyla takes it, surprised by his strength. Ibrahim leads her to a corner of the garden, where a group of gardeners are gathered around a large pile of soil. "This is our whispered soil," Ibrahim says, his voice low. "It is the memory of our gardens." Leyla looks at the soil, puzzled. "What do you mean?" she asks. Ibrahim gestures for her to sit on a nearby stone bench. "Each handful of earth is a library," he says, his eyes twinkling. "A living library of our past failures and triumphs. When we mix the soil, we are mixing stories, recipes, remedies. We are passing down knowledge that has been handed down to us for generations." He reaches into the pile of soil and takes a handful. "Feel it," he says, his voice filled with reverence. "Can you feel the stories within?" Leyla closes her eyes, feeling the weight of the soil in her palm. She can sense a kind of energy within it, a whisper of voices long gone. She opens her eyes and looks at the other gardeners. They are all watching her, their faces etched with a mixture of hope and apprehension. I think I can," she whispers, feeling a sudden surge of determination. "I want to learn," she says, her voice ringing with newfound clarity. "I want to be your apprentice." The gardeners exchange glances, their expressions unreadable. Finally, Ibrahim speaks. "Very well," he says. "We will teach you the language of the soil. But be warned, once you hear its whispers, you can never go back to the way things were." Leyla's heart pounds in her chest as she realizes the magnitude of what she has just agreed to. But she doesn't hesitate. Kneeling beside the soil, she takes a deep breath and lets the whispers envelop her. Over the next few days, Leyla immerses herself in the study of whispered soil. The gardeners, initially wary of the outsider, slowly begin to accept her, sharing their knowledge and welcoming her into their midst. They teach her how to read the subtle signs of the soil, how to feel its texture and smell its aromas. Each day she learns something new, some little trick or technique that has been passed down through generations of gardeners. Leyla keeps a journal, filling its pages with sketches of soil strata and notes on subtle aroma differences. She pores over old texts, trying to piece together the history of the whispered soil. She discovers that the practice dates back centuries to a time when the Ottoman Empire was at the height of its power. The gardeners, it turns out, were not just gardeners, but alchemists of the earth. They believed that the soil held the secrets to immortality, and they experimented with different mixtures, trying to create the perfect elixir. Over time, they developed their own language, a way of communicating with each other through the manipulation of the soil. As Leyla learns more about the whispered soil, she begins to understand why the gardeners are so protective of it. It is not just a horticultural technique, it is a way of life, a legacy that has been passed down through the ages. And she feels honored to be a part of it. But as she delves deeper into the mystery of the soil, she also begins to uncover a darker side to it. For the gardeners are not the only ones who seek the secrets of the earth. There are others, shadowy figures, who lurk in the palace walls, always watching, always listening. And they, too, are searching for the whispers of the soil. Leyla finds herself caught in a web of intrigue and danger, and she must use all her wits to survive. But as the plot thickens, she also finds herself falling in love with the gardens, with the soil, with the very essence of the earth itself. And she realizes that her journey has just begun. The wind is bitter tonight, but the air in the hothouses is warm and sweet with the smell of ripening fruit. Leyla walks among the arched lattice, admiring the blossoms that perfume the night. They're beautiful, these gardens, a testament to human ingenuity, an oasis of beauty in this rugged landscape. But Leyla knows there is more here than meets the eye. Beneath the parterre of tulips and the orderly rows of vegetables, there's a hidden world, one she can sense stirring beneath the surface. Her companions for the evening, Hallo and Ibrahim, seem unaware of this. They stroll arm in arm, sharing jokes and gossip. Leyla smiles politely when she hears them, but she cannot shake the feeling that something has been awakened in her since her arrival at the palace. Something stirs in the gardens, something like magic, and as the moon climbs higher in the sky, Leyla knows that she must uncover the secrets of the whispered soil before it's too late. That's all for today. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to like and subscribe. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time. It's day 47. I don't think I've ever recorded on this channel from Istanbul. Today's prompt is backlit petals reveal striations in ruby, gold, and alabaster. Each spoke a clue to genetic heritage. Under Aziz's guidance, Leyla learns to peer from microscopic ridges and faint color veils that predict bloom shape. They dissect wilted flowers under candlelight to refine their breeding charts. Their meticulous record-keeping feels more like artistry than science. We're gone, now take a moment now and look at what the word of the day has to offer us. The first thing I see when I look at the word of the day is the word backlit, and I immediately have an image in my mind of sunlight streaming through the window onto the desk of a scientist or maybe a student. It's the kind of light that you often get in old-school movies, where it streams through a single window onto one side of a desk, leaving the other side in darkness. So we have this very strong sense of place and time, which is always helpful when you're doing a painting from a word of the day. The second part of the phrase is petals, reveal striations. The first word I want to focus on is reveal, because I think the most interesting thing about petals are not the striations, but what they conceal. A petal conceals the structure that allows it to open up and then closes back up. A flower can open and close its petals many times over the course of its life, but each time it does so, it becomes more difficult for the plant. So as it gets older, it just stays closed until it dies. But the reason that I love this idea of the flower hiding something inside of it is because it relates to another idea that I had from yesterday's painting. Yesterday's painting was about nightingales. Nightingales sing their song at night. They hide during the day, and they also have this beautiful song inside of them that they will never share with anyone. They keep it to themselves. So this idea of things that are hidden and revealed is really interesting to me. I'm going to try to do a painting that shows both of these ideas. The idea of the flower revealing something and the idea of the flower concealing something. I'm thinking about doing a vertical piece. I love vertical pieces. They feel more elegant to me. I'm going to do a vertical piece. We'll do a small vertical piece. Okay, let's start off by just playing around with colors. The word of the day included these three colors: ruby, gold, and alabaster. Those are really nice colors, and they do feel very Turkish. I associate those colors strongly with the colors that you'd find in Turkish Delftware. And since this entire series is inspired by Delftware, it makes sense to use those colors. I'm also going to throw in some Prussian blue, because I really like that color, and it doesn't show up very often in this series. Alright, I'm gonna sketch out the basic shapes of the painting. Now, I'm pretty sure I want to have a hand in here holding a flower. I like that idea. That gives me a way to introduce the whole idea of concealment. If the hand is holding the flower, then there's something behind the flower. The hand is concealing something. I also want to show the underside of the petals, so I can show that vein pattern that we talked about yesterday. It's important to me that I make that connection to yesterday's work. Now I'm just going to block out the rest of the painting. Add a little bit of background, put our flower in the foreground. Okay, I'm happy with that. Let's move on to adding some detail. Alright, I'm starting to get into the fun parts of the painting. Now, one of my favorite parts of painting is adding the details. This is where the painting really starts to come to life. For me, the question is always how much detail should I add? In general, I like to keep the background fairly simple, and then I put all of my detail in the foreground. It's just a personal preference. I don't know why I like it, I just do. So while I'm adding the detail to the foreground, I'm going to leave the background relatively simple. Now, the hand holding the flower is really important to this painting. There's a lot going on in that hand. First of all, the fingers are spread wide so that we can see what's behind the flower. That's the concealment part. But then, if we look closely at the hand, we can see some of the striations that we saw in the petals. The lines run down the fingers and they even wrap around the thumb. These lines are the same lines that appear in the petals. So that's the reveal part. Okay, I'm getting pretty happy with this painting. I'm starting to think about finishing it up. I need to add some light to the scene. Adding light is very important to a painting. Without light, the painting feels very static. There's no action, everything just sits there. So adding light gives your painting a sense of energy. One of my favorite ways to add light to a painting is to paint something that casts a shadow. A shadow is very simple to paint. It's just a darker version of the color that you're looking at. In this case, I'm going to paint the shadow of the flower on the table. The shadow of the flower is a much darker red than the flower itself, so it's easy to make that shadow pop. I can also darken the table a little bit and make the background darker to give the shadow more contrast. Now that I've added the shadow, I can see that I need to add some light directly to the flower. Otherwise, the flower is going to be too dark. Painting light onto a flower is easy. You just take a lighter version of the color that you're re-looking at and you start to paint it on. In this case, I'm going to lighten the reds and yellows a little bit and start to bring some of that light onto the petals. Now, I can also add some light to the hand. It's basically the same technique. Just take a lighter version of the color and paint it on. Now, let's look at the background. The background feels a little bit empty. Adding some light to the background would help. I could probably add a lamp or maybe a sconce on the wall. I think a sconce would look nice. I can just darken the walls a little bit and give the sconce a little bit of light coming off of it. That will help. I can also add a little bit of light onto the desk. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. I think I'm ready to finish up. All I need to do now is add some final touches. Now I'm going to go back in and add a few final touches to the painting. I'm going to start by adding a little bit of gash to the petals. It's very simple. I am just going to cut the petals right down the middle and then add a little bit of gold leaf. That will look nice. I'm also going to add a few more lines to the painting. These lines will connect the flower to the hand and help to tie everything together. I can also add a few more details to the background, and that will help to fill it out a little bit. Now I'm going to add the finishing touch to the painting, the thing that will pull everything together and make it all come to life. That is the highlight. In this case, I'm going to add a very simple highlight, a single ray of light coming from the sconce in the background. I'm going to use a very bright white to add this highlight. It's going to be the brightest spot in the entire painting. The highlight will catch the petals and the hand, and the highlight will reflect off of the desk as well. By adding this highlight, I'm bringing the whole scene to life. It feels like there's movement and action happening in the painting. That's it, I'm finished. I hope you enjoyed this painting, and I hope you learned something new. A Chronicle of Ottoman Tulip Cultivation. Chapter 6. The Festival of Tulips. The sun was a brazen coin tossed into the sea. Each wave tipped its hat to catch the light before tumbling away in silver and gold. A light breeze carried the scent of orange blossom and wood smoke over the city. It was early April, the third month of the Ottoman Sultan's 12th year in power, and the time for tulips to bloom. Over the past 2 years, the entire city of Istanbul had been transformed to accommodate the Sultan's obsession. Every rooftop and balcony boasted a bed of flowers, and even the mosques were not spared. Yet nowhere were more beautiful than here at the Topkapi Palace, where 300,000 bulbs planted by the Sultan himself had erupted in a riot of color. By his command, the entire landscape had been reconfigured to form the world's largest garden, and today it would be unveiled. From the Imperial Council chamber, Mehmed watched his prize creation. First, the flower beds on the fourth terrace, a breathtaking carpet of red, yellow, white, and purple tulips. But that was only the beginning. More spilled onto the esplanade below, coursing down the hillside like waterfalls, freezing mid-tumble. At the bottom, the flower beds formed a circular pond. Then, around the base of the hill, framing the view, were 40 new pavilions. Each one had been decorated with thousands of flowers and connected by narrow causeways, forming an island paradise accessible only by foot. The sight was enough to stop a man's heart and make him weep with joy. A courtier approached, adjusting his crimson fez. "Your Highness," he said, "all is ready for the festival." Mehmed nodded, rising from his seat. He adjusted the girdle at his waist, then walked to the center of the room where his finest garments lay folded, waiting. Today, he would wear the one his father, the Grand Sultan, had worn when he first viewed the tulip fields in Holland. It was fashioned from the finest Turkish cotton and embroidered with gold thread, depicting scenes of men on horseback beneath blossoming trees. He joined the procession at the head of the grand staircase, which had also been entirely covered in tulips. His harem, all 500 women strong, followed behind him, each clutching a bouquet the size of a small pillow. The courtiers fanned out around them, forming a canopy with their own flowers. They walked in silence until they reached the palace gates, which had been draped in garlands and emblazoned with banners proclaiming the Sultan's name and the tulip as an emblem of Ottoman might. The courtyard was filled with tents and pavilions, offering food, drink, and entertainment. Musicians played zurna and daf as the throng entered the gardens. The air filled with the sound of laughter, the smell of roasting meat, and sweet coconut candy. The crowds thronged the pathways, stopping to admire the displays. On every side, there were booths selling tulip bulbs, which were so valuable they were treated like precious coins. People exchanged them like currency, purchasing sweets and toys for their children. Leyla stopped at a particularly fine display of white tulips with yellow centers, a variety she hadn't seen before. A vendor with a walrus moustache bowed before her. "Their likes are rare, my lady, but the Sultan has planted many here this year. Their petals are soft as silk, and their fragrance lingers long after they're crushed." He handed her a bouquet, then gestured toward the center of the garden where a group of young ladies stood watching a troupe of acrobats dance atop a tall fountain. She turned to go, nearly tripping over a small boy with a basket of sweets. He looked up at her with large, imploring eyes. "Please, honorable lady, buy some coconut candy for your gracious Sultan. Only a fool refuses such a treat on a day like today." Her lips twitched in a smile. "You flatter me, little one, but I will take some for the palace kitchens. Tell me, what is your name?" "Osman, my lady. My father makes the finest sweets in all of Istanbul. Then I look forward to trying them." She picked out several pieces, then placed them in the boy's basket along with some coins. "And perhaps you would like something for yourself." He shook his head quickly. "No, thank you, my lady. You have honored me enough." As she walked away, she heard him call out to another customer. "Don't forget, "Esteemed sir, the Sultan's tulips are the finest in all the land. No one knows their secrets better than we do." At that moment, the Grand Vizier approached, bowing low. "Your Highness," he said, "are you ready to view the spectacle?" Memdi nodded. As they walked toward the gazebo, the Vizier spoke again. "There are spies in the city, Your Highness, both Venetian and Viennese. They watch us closely and no doubt wish they understood our secrets." He paused. "What do you think we should do with them?" "Let them watch," Mehmed said, dismissing the question. "They can take back stories of our splendor to their masters, but that will only increase their desire for our flowers. That is what we want, is it not? To spread the fame of the Ottoman Empire, a fanfare of trumpets heralded their arrival at the gazebo. From here, they could see the entire garden laid out before them. Then the musicians struck up a lively tune and the dancers appeared, twirling and leaping among the flowers. Among them was the young princess, her dark braids interwoven with yellow silk. As she danced, she let each petal brush her wrist, sending the crowd into a frenzy. The show lasted hours, filled with games, contests, fireworks, and music. When it ended, the Sultan took his daughter aside, presenting her with a golden tulip cup filled with coconut candy. She beamed up at him, then skipped away to join the other children. Amidst the revelry, two men slipped through the crowd, avoiding the flower beds, heading instead for the outer wall. One was tall and muscular, dressed as a simple gardener. The other was slight and nimble, disguised as an Armenian merchant. Neither spoke as they made their way to a prearranged landmark, two fountains shaped like dolphins leaping from the sea. When they met, the merchant dipped his head slightly in greeting. The gardener returned the gesture, then gestured toward the palace. "Have you seen everything you need to see?" The merchant nodded. "Indeed, the layout of the gardens, the numbers of the guards, the Sultan's pavilion, yes, all noted." The gardener grunted. "Then we must leave before dawn. We have a long journey to Vienna." That night, under the cloak of darkness, the spies made their way out of the city. Ahead of them lay the mountains and the frozen sea of ice. But in their minds, they already felt the warmth of the Viennese sun and the eager faces of the Emperor and Empress. Soon, the Turks would know the secret of the tulip, just as the Europeans had done for years. Back in the palace, amidst the overflowing treasure chests and crumpled receipts, the old treasurer pored over ledgers, checking entries and tallying totals. Last year's expenditures had set the empire back 200,000 gold pieces, but the additional cost of expanding the garden and holding the festival would push this year's expenses well beyond that. He sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. If anyone else had spent this much money on a frivolous thing, they would surely be beheaded. But the Sultan wasn't anyone else. This year's festival had gone off without a hitch, but next year promised to be even grander. Already, merchants from Holland were due to arrive with new varieties of tulips, not to mention those bulbs smuggled from Persia. The ones with the intoxicating opium scent. He looked up as Leyla entered, her skirts swishing around her ankles. "Anything wrong, treasurer?" "Just thinking, my lady, about how fortunate we are that the Sultan has found such a passion in life. I believe he genuinely enjoys it." "Treasurer," Leyla said softly, "it brings him great joy." "Of course, my lady, of course." He dipped his head in respect. "If you need anything, just send word." "Thank you, treasurer. And please, no more poetry." He blinked, confused. "My lady, I don't understand." She smiled faintly. "Never mind. Prepare the rose-scented oil for my bath tonight, would you? And make sure the copper cauldron is clean. I believe I shall invite some friends to see the moon rise over the Sea of Marmara." As the treasurer hurried away, she leaned against the door jamb, staring out into the darkness. In the distance, the crescent moon hung like a silver sickle against the velvet sky. She inhaled deeply, savoring the night air. Soon, the whole world would know of the Ottoman tulip. And so it came to pass that the last bastion of European ignorance fell before the tide of Ottoman splendor. All right, I'm gonna read chapter 7 of A Chronicle of Ottoman Tulip Cultivation. This is my favorite part of the story so far. So let's just jump right into it. It was well after sunset when Leyla heard a soft knock at the door to her pavilion. She set down her work basket, the one that always accompanied her these days like a loyal dog, and went to see who was there. The moon had climbed halfway up the sky by the time the visitor identified himself. It was Loretta, a Venetian, staying at the Grand Embassy. He had come alone, which did not bode well. No respectable visitor came to the Sultan's gardens without an escort, and any envoy would be accompanied by at least 2 guards. He looked furtive, his eyes darting about as if expecting an ambush. His hands were also empty, which meant he had not come in peace. He did not have a gift to offer. Leyla opened the door wider. "What do you want?" she said, keeping her voice neutral. "I need your help," he said, stepping inside. "I need you to give me something." Leyla closed the door behind him and leaned against it, arms crossed. "And what exactly do you want from me?" "You know, I do not have anything that belongs to the Sultan here in my rooms." "Not anything that belongs to the Sultan?" "No," Loretta said. He was young, barely older than her brother Osman, and his face was handsome in a foreign sort of way, with high cheekbones and eyes that shone bright even in the dim oil lamplight that spilled out from beneath her door. But none of that made him any less irritating. "You have something that belongs to me," he said. "Something you stole from me." Leyla laughed. "Oh, you misunderstand. I have nothing of yours. And besides, this conversation would be more pleasant if you were not treading on my rug with those filthy Venetian shoes of yours. Would you care to remove them before you continue to insult me?" He took a step back, eyes flashing. "I am insulting you because you have wronged me. Woman, give me back what you stole and I will overlook your insolence." "How very generous of you," she said dryly. "Very well. What exactly did I steal from you?" "Cornelius told me you have something of great value," Loretta said. "The most exquisite tulips in the whole empire. He said they were sent directly from the palace gardens. Is this not true? Have you been given rare bulbs from the royal collection?" Leyla frowned. "Cornelius, of course. It was Cornelius, that crafty rogue. He probably hoped she would get blamed for this. How dare he?" Her fingers tightened into fists. "Have you lost your mind? Who would send me such things? And why would I have them here? In my rooms, I have nothing of value." She turned away, hoping he wouldn't notice the flush creeping up her neck and the tremor in her voice. But Loretta stepped closer. "Then why did Cornelius come to me offering to sell me a bulb? Not just any bulb, mind you, but a sample from the Sultan's prized Crimson Tears collection. An unopened bud taken from the royal beds themselves. Cornelius is a liar and a thief," Leyla said sharply. "Do not believe everything he tells you. Come to think of it, you should not believe anything he tells you. He is nothing but trouble." "But he told me the truth about the tulips," Loretta pressed. "He said you have them. Where are they, woman? Show me where they are hidden." Leyla raised her head, eyes blazing. If only she could make him see how wrong he was, how misguided. She wanted to scream, to shake him until sense returned. But she didn't raise her voice. She would not give him the satisfaction. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said quietly. "If you have nothing else to say, you are welcome to leave now." "Don't play coy with me," he snapped, reaching out to grab her arm. "This is important. My government would pay handsomely for such a prize. She flinched away from his touch, and he immediately looked chagrined. She hated how he had brushed against her like that, violating her personal space. Women in Europe were apparently quite familiar with such liberties, but she had never allowed anyone to treat her that way, not even her late husband. "Let go of me," she whispered, horrified that her voice had betrayed her, and trembled. "Are you hurt?" he asked, releasing her and stepping back. Leyla shook her head, willing her heart to stop thudding against her ribs like a trapped bird. "No, I'm fine," she lied, hating the tremor still present in her voice. He regarded her for a long moment, then sighed and ran a hand through his unruly red-gold hair. It was the color of the finest copper she had ever seen. "Then I thank you for your hospitality, Lady Gardner," he said, turning toward the door. "Perhaps another time we can talk freely and without subterfuge." Leyla watched him leave, not taking her eyes off him until the oiled cloth slippers were the only sound in the silent hallway. She waited until his footsteps had faded away and then sank to the floor, sliding down the door with a sob. Tears streamed down her face as she pulled her shawl tight around her shoulders, burying her nose in its folds. When she finally lifted her head, she dabbed at her eyes with the skirt of her gown, willing herself to stop crying. No, she mustn't cry. She was close to exposing herself. She couldn't afford to let Loretta suspect that she knew more than she was letting on. When she stood up, she went straight to her writing desk and took up her journal. She dipped her quill into the ink, then wrote a single line in the latest entry, underlined twice. She would have to be careful. Cornelius had obviously told Leota that she had the bulbs. That meant she needed to alert Mustafa to the fact that someone was looking for the tulips. Who was this Loretta, anyway? Why did he need the bulbs? Was he merely a collector, seeking rarities for his own garden? Or was there some grander purpose behind his request? Hadn't the Sultan specifically ordered that no one was to leave the empire with a single royal tulip? The thought that the Crimson Tears might be leaving the country, and that she might be the one blamed if they were caught, gave her goosebumps. As she wrote, she thought back to her encounter with Loretta. Had she been too rough with him? Should she have tried to reason with the man? He was hardly older than a boy, really, and she supposed it must have been very exciting for him to sneak out of the embassy and into the forbidden Sultan-esque gardens. It was terribly dangerous, but he had done it. And more importantly, he had found her. Now that she thought about it, he hadn't actually touched her. Not really. He had brushed against her, yes, but he had quickly drawn back when he saw how upset it made her. Was he trying to test her? Was that why he had stayed so long? To see if she would yield to him? Well, he needn't worry on that score. She would never allow herself to be violated like the women of Venice. She shuddered to think what he might have done to them, those poor souls. Her thoughts drifted to the Sultan. She wondered what he was doing right now, if he missed her as much as she missed him. She longed to be in his arms, to feel his lips on hers, to lose herself in the one place she knew she could truly be free. But she couldn't be with him right now. Not until she uncovered the plot against him. Not until she knew he was safe. She owed him that much, and perhaps it was that debt that gave her the strength to go on. The resolve to endure all the dangers that lay ahead. She would protect him, whatever the cost. And on that note, I'm gonna end Chapter 7. I hope you enjoyed it. We got a little bit spicy there at the end. But you know, she's devoted to the Sultan. She's gonna do whatever it takes to keep him safe. And honestly, I kind of love her for that. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please leave me a like or a comment. Maybe even subscribe and join the community. And I'll see you next time for part 8. Peace be upon you. Alright, welcome back, my little horticultural hotshots. It's me, and this is a chronicle of Ottoman tulip cultivation. Come for the tulips, and stay, because I may have inadvertently unleashed a very alive and well, actually somewhat angry spirit of linguistic appropriation upon the world. Send tweet. Chapter 7 ended on a bit of a cliffhanger, with Aziz having found his way back to his homeland after years in exile. Now, his return has been kept secret for fear that Dutch agents might be lurking about, looking to take him back to Holland, or worse, have him assassinated. But word travels fast, and it reaches the ears of none other than Cornelius, the head gardener of the rival palace gardens. And seeing as he has a private audience with the Sultan's wife, Lady Hustan Murad, who is in charge of said gardens, he uses the opportunity to reveal who he really is, a former student of Aziz, and lay out his plan to steal his old master's secrets and ship them off to Europe. And just to prove how much of a badass he is, he throws down the gauntlet, daring Leyla to grow a new bicolor variety of tulip before the end of the season, or else Ottoman methods would be proven obsolete and backwards forever. As you can imagine, Aziz is pretty pissed about all of this, especially since he didn't even get to gloat about being right about tulips being perennial for 1 minute. But what are we to do? All we can do is try our best to win the race against the clock and come up with a brand new type of tulip. So Aziz, Leyla, and their crew of merry horticulturalists set to work in the greenhouses, trying everything they can think of to make the perfect new bloom. But while they work, we're gonna take a little detour to the palace gardens, where Cornelius is gleefully telling Lady Husna Murad all about how he used to study under Aziz, blah blah blah, and revealing that he has a big surprise for her. Something that will surely impress her more than his surprise of last chapter. See, last chapter, when Cornelius first arrived, he was carrying a large potted plant covered in a blanket, and he told Lady Husna Murad it was a rose from her garden that had taken root in his travels, and he wanted to give it back to her. When she complimented him on his thoughtfulness, he got all red-faced and stammered and acted like it was no big deal, but then later revealed that it was actually a rare Cypripedium orchid worth an absolute fortune. This time around, he's got another potted plant with him, only this one is covered in an extra thick layer of cloth, clearly hiding something bigger. Cornelius tells her that this plant is the reason he has returned to Constantinople, though not exactly how it's involved, at least not yet. And while he's being purposefully vague, we know exactly what he's hiding. It's a bunch of bulbs, specifically these 3, which represent the very first tulips ever brought to Western Asia and the literal seeds of the European tulip craze. Though the anachronistic part is that Cornelius refers to them as tulip bulbs. In the story so far, we've always referred to them as flower bulbs, to avoid any confusion with the vegetable. Anyway, he says that he traveled by sea to bring the bulbs here, but was forced to stop in Venice on the way and tend them in a greenhouse there for a whole year. While he was there, he says, he cultivated some of the finest specimens of these flowers, the likes of which the Sultan's own gardens have never seen. And if she allows him to start planting them, he'll show her. With that, he unveils his wares and presents her with a trio of hand-painted flower pots, each filled with a row of vibrantly colored bulbs, red, yellow, and purple. Now, Lady Husna Murad isn't exactly an expert on plants, but even she can tell that these are an impressive array of colors for flower bulbs, let alone the fact that they're perennial. She gives her permission for him to plant them in the palace gardens and watch as he does, unable to help but wonder if maybe her decision to fire Aziz and hire Cornelius was the wrong one. Back in the greenhouse, the team is working hard to produce a new bicentennial flower, though not without tension. Every so often, Leyla's sister Defin gets frustrated with Leyla's lack of progress and snaps at her. pointing out that she hasn't come up with anything yet. But Aziz stops her, reminding her that they still have time. Leyla herself is also starting to get discouraged. Despite her confidence at the beginning, the pressure of producing a new flower to save her father's legacy is starting to weigh on her. And the constant reminders from her family and friends are unhelping. One night, she takes a break and goes for a walk, ending up at a secluded greenhouse where she knows some of her father's older bulbs are stored. Among them are some that he worked on specifically for her, including a particularly beautiful striped one. She sits down next to them, defeated, thinking about how she has failed to live up to her father's legacy so far, and how now she has the chance to make him proud but is messing it up. Then, as she looks over the rows of bulbs, something catches her eye. It's one of her father's older books on tulip cultivation. She opens it up and begins flipping through the pages until she sees something. A small sketch of a flower in the margin, unlike any she has seen before. Could this be it? The flower that will save her father's legacy? Well, the book is written in her father's own handwriting, so we can take a look ourselves. And what we see is this: a strange tulip with petals that appear to shift color depending on the angle you view them from. That's right, folks. Leyla has just discovered the secret to making the perfect bicolor tulip, chameleon. That's a good name. Meanwhile, at the palace gardens, Cornelius is tending to his newly planted bulbs, which are already starting to sprout green shoots. He smiles to himself, thinking about how he's finally going to get his revenge on Aziz, who never gave him the credit he deserved for his skills. Then he looks down at the sprouts and his smile widens. He's so close. He then notices something odd, though. One of the red plants doesn't look quite right, its leaves wilted and drooping. He walks closer to investigate, and his face falls. The plant is dying. Turns out one of the bulbs was rotten and infected, and spread the disease to its companions. He quickly digs them up and discards them, then goes to find Lady Hassan Murad. He tells her what happened and tries to assure her that it won't happen again. But she's not convinced. There's a look on his face that makes her uneasy, and she wonders if she made the right choice in firing Aziz. Just then, a messenger arrives from the Sultan asking for the Lady Hasna Murad to come to the palace right away. She bids Cornelius to tend to the gardens in her absence and heads out, leaving him alone in the gardens with the dying flower bulb and a growing sense of dread. Back in the greenhouse, Leyla is presenting her discovery to Aziz, who is understandably impressed. Not only is the flower beautiful, but the way it changes color, depending on the angle you look at it from, is a sign of extreme genetic modification. Something that could revolutionize the way tulips are cultivated forever. However, they both know that it's not quite ready yet. It needs to be grown larger, and the season is almost over. It'll need to wait till next year, unless they could somehow speed it up. Leyla suddenly remembers something from her father's book, the use of hot sand. A technique he developed to speed up the growth of flowers by giving them a mini heat dome. They could try it with the chameleon flower. There's a chance it would work. With that, the two get to work, carefully transplanting the precious flower into a container full of hot sand and then placing the container inside a smaller greenhouse. Kind of like a greenhouse within a greenhouse. Will it work? Well, if it does, it means Leyla will have produced a brand new flower in a single season and saved her father's legacy. And if it doesn't, well, at least we learned a lot about flower bulbs. I don't know about you, but I'm really interested to see if the flower ends up working. Will Cornelius's flower bulbs catch on in the palace gardens? Can Leyla produce a brand new type of flower in time to save her father's legacy? And what the heck is this thing even supposed to be called? Join us next time to find out in Chapter 9, where we'll answer all of these questions and many more. And now, for the first time ever, I'd like to extend a personal invitation to you, my viewers, to join me on a platform where I share early access to every episode of the Chronicle of Ottoman Tulip Cultivation, along with exclusive bonus content and early access to episodes of other shows I am working on. If that sounds interesting, check the description below for more details. As always, thank you all so much for watching and supporting this channel. It really means a lot to me. Special thanks to my supporters. Remember, the flower bulbs, they just keep coming back. A Chronicle of Ottoman Tulip Cultivation, Chapter 9, Midnight Cross-Pollination. The sun had dipped below the horizon an hour ago, and the sky was deepening into indigo, heavy with the scent of night-blooming jasmine. Leyla slipped out of the house, careful not to wake anyone. Her father would be up soon, no doubt sharpening his sickles for the day's work in the fields. But tonight was her night. The greenhouse beckoned, glowing faintly silver in the gathering dark. She brought with her a lantern whose flame danced merrily in the evening breeze, illuminating the neat rows of tulips. Their velvet petals were unfurled, drinking deep the precious night air. The shapes were stunning. There were giant parrot tulips with ruffled edges that resembled a peacock's tail feathers. Others were striped like a tiger's hide. Some stood tall and elegant, and others were so perfectly formed they looked like jewels cut precisely from stained glass. But it was the color that made these flowers truly special. While European tulips boasted red, yellow, or purple, the Ottoman Empire's prized blossoms came in shades unknown elsewhere, thanks to centuries of patient cultivation. Here, the petals could be pink or violet, striped green, or splashed with white, and there were even pale blue ones, though seeing them was considered a rare blessing. Leyla paused before the plants, taking a deep breath. In this place of enchantment, she felt at peace. This tranquility wouldn't last. Soon her father would rouse, and then the greenhouse would fill with the clamor of workers. But for now, she had stolen an hour from daylight to commune with the flowers alone. In her hand, a silk cloth fluttered like a moth's wings. It was a simple tool, but in Leyla's hands, it became an instrument of magic. She selected two blooms, their trembling petals barely brushing. One was the palest of pinks, almost white. The other was the deepest crimson, like the heart of a ruby. With a gentle touch, she brushed the silk between them, collecting pollen on its surface like gold dust. Her grandmother had taught her this technique years ago when Leyla was still learning the secrets of the greenhouse. Now, as the hours passed, she moved from plant to plant, performing the same delicate ritual. Each flower demanded patience, concentration, and care. If she failed, the blossom might not set seed and the experiment would fail. But if she succeeded, the result would be worth all her effort. Her grandmother had told her stories about the first people who cultivated colored tulips in the Ottoman Empire. How they had patiently cross-pollinated flowers until they coaxed the perfect shade of pink. They had been celebrated as heroes, their names written down in the Book of Flowers, a treasured heirloom of the family. As the fireflies began their nightly dance outside, Leyla worked on. By the time the first hints of dawn touched the sky, she had finished with the pink and crimson tulips. Now she moved to a new pair, one a shell pink and the other a deep red. Again, she brushed the silk between them, whispering an ancient Anatolian incantation her grandmother had taught her. It was just an old wives' tale. Really, a bit of superstition meant to focus her mind and ensure her success. But as she spoke the words, she believed with all her heart that they carried power. This continued until the sky was awash with the soft pinks and oranges of sunrise. Then, with shaking hands, Leyla pulled on a glove before touching the final pair of tulips. These were the most important. The first one was a vivid turquoise, the color of the sky after a summer storm. The second was the purest white, like fresh fallen snow. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and brushed the silk between them. As the light of day touched the greenhouse, she examined the results of her labor. The petals of the white tulips were stained with the faintest trace of green. Not enough, she sighed. Next year she must try again, but the other flowers seemed perfect. With a mix of triumph and exhaustion, she labeled each newly pollinated bulb. The pink and crimson ones would become Yume's dream, a tribute to her grandmother. The shell, pink and deep red, would be called Beloved's Blush, and the turquoise and white would bear the name Sky's Embrace. As she stepped out of the greenhouse, the sun rose higher in the sky, and the sounds of her father working in the fields drifted to her ears. Leyla stretched, feeling the satisfying ache of muscles well used. For a moment, she lingered, watching the tulips unfurl in the morning light. Soon, she knew, the greenhouse would be filled with workers, their voices echoing between the glass panes. But for now, she had a few precious moments of solitude. She dipped inside to retrieve her watercolors and sketchpad. Though she didn't know it yet, this would become a famous painting one day, a depiction of a moment that had already passed. The sun glinted off the glass roof, turning the greenhouse into a kaleidoscope of colors. She sat on a nearby bench, dipping her brush into a pool of cerulean blue. It was the exact shade of the sky on a clear summer day, the kind of day when the sun blazed down and the air shimmered with heat. She mixed in some white, then some touches of turquoise and emerald. It took her only a few strokes to capture the essence of her beloved greenhouse, the play of light and shadow on the glass panes. The way the plants reached toward the sun, the gleam of dew on a spider's thread. She signed the painting simply Leyla. She didn't need to add the title yet. Morning Serenade. It would be famous one day, hanging in a gallery in Istanbul, admired by all who saw it. But right now, it was just a watercolor sketchpad tucked away in a quiet corner of the garden. Meanwhile, the workers were arriving, their chatter growing steadily louder. Leyla folded up her art supplies and slipped out of the greenhouse just as her father appeared in the doorway. He looked weary from his labors in the fields, his skin bronzed by the sun, his eyes squinting against its glare. "Good morning, Baba," she said, her voice lilting like a songbird's. "Did you sleep well?" he asked, ruffling her hair. She nodded, unable to shake the lingering sleepiness from her eyes. He smiled, knowing better than to question her nocturnal habits. He had found her in here many times, tending the plants or sketching the flowers. Sometimes she would stay late into the night, lost in the world of the greenhouse. Though he couldn't understand her fascination with these exotic plants, he respected his daughter's passions. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the workers bustle around them. Leyla's gaze drifted to the rows upon rows of tulips, each a tiny masterpiece. Her father followed her eyes and saw not just flowers, but a reflection of his daughter's spirit, delicate, resilient, and bursting with color. Before long, the greenhouse would be filled with the vibrant hues of 1,000 blooms, a testament to generations of patient work. And when the time was right, Leyla would take her place among them, continuing the family's legacy. For now, though, it was time to start the day. Together, father and daughter walked out of the greenhouse and into the bustling marketplace. The air was thick with the scent of spices and roasting coffee. People crowded the narrow lanes, their voices mingling with the cries of vendors hawking their wares. Leyla's senses were on high alert, soaking in the sights and sounds, the feel of rough stone beneath her feet, the taste of sweet pomegranate juice on her lips, the sound of a lute player's mournful melody. She squeezed her father's hand, reveling in the warmth of his presence. Though she loved exploring the city, she always felt safer when he was by her side. Her father squeezed back, his calloused hand enveloping hers like a protective glove. In that simple gesture, she found comfort and strength. As they navigated the maze of stalls and shops, Leyla couldn't help but wonder what adventures awaited her that day. Would she find a rare book in the merchant's shop? Or perhaps a beautiful piece of fabric to add to her collection? Maybe she would stumble upon a hidden courtyard blooming with night-scented jasmine. Whatever lay in store, she knew she could face it with courage and curiosity, thanks to the love and support of her family. Together, they were ready for anything. And so, hand in hand, father and daughter continued their exploration of the city, their hearts full of hope and wonder. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe for more stories. The air crackles with anticipation as Leyla prepares for her final presentation of the Great Festival of Tulips. Her hands tremble slightly as she takes the small pot containing her prize blossom from the shelf. This tulip is unlike any other. It's a unique variety that she has nurtured for months, and its petals dance between shades of rose and ivory, almost as if they have a life of their own. As the crowds begin to gather in the courtyard, Leyla arranges the pots on the long table, each one a masterpiece of color and form. She glances at Cornelius, who stands stiffly beside her, his face drawn and pale. His tulips are not doing well, and she knows he's worried about what might happen next. But Leyla is focused on the task at hand. She knows that this festival could change everything, not only for her and Cornelius, but for the entire empire. With a deep breath, she steps forward to greet the Sultan as he enters the courtyard with his entourage. He's a tall, imposing figure with a strong jaw and piercing eyes. Despite his regal bearing, there's something about him that seems distant, as if he's more interested in the power he wields than the people he rules over. Leyla remembers the stories her grandmother used to tell her about the sultans of old, how they were known for their wisdom and compassion. But this sultan seems like a shadow of those legendary rulers. Still, she can't help but be captivated by him, and she knows that the fate of her and Cornelius hangs in the balance of his approval. As the festival begins, the crowd gasps and murmurs at the sight of the tulips in full bloom. They're unlike anything the Empire has ever seen before, and the colors and patterns seem almost otherworldly. Leyla watches with a mixture of pride and anxiety as the other contestants unveil their own creations. There are some beautiful blooms among them, but none that could rival the ones she's grown with Cornelius. Still, she knows that the competition is fierce and that even the smallest misstep could cost her the prize. When it's her turn to present, she steps forward with the small pot containing the unique blossom and places it on the table. The crowd leans closer, eager to see what she has prepared. With a deep breath, she removes the cover and the crowd gasps. The petals of the tulip are dancing between shades of rose and ivory, almost as if they're alive. It's a rare and unexpected color shift that no one has ever seen before, and the crowd murmurs in astonishment. The Sultan's eyes narrow slightly, and Leyla holds her breath as he examines the flower closely. She can feel Cornelius's gaze burning into her back, and she knows he's just as nervous as she is. Finally, the Sultan nods his head slowly. "This is an excellent specimen," he says in a deep voice that echoes across the courtyard. "The color combination is most unusual. I have never seen anything like it." Leyla's heart swells with relief and quiet triumph. She knew her tulip was special, but she didn't know if the Sultan would appreciate it. His approval means everything to her, not only because it's the highest honor she could receive, but because it gives her hope for a better future for herself and Cornelius. The other contestants may be envious or bitter, but Leyla feels nothing but sympathy for them. She knows how hard they've worked and how dedicated they are to their craft. But only one person can win the grand prize, and she's grateful that it's her. As the crowd begins to disperse, Leyla lingers near the Sultan, hoping for a few words of praise, or maybe even a touch on the shoulder to acknowledge her victory. But he seems distant and uninterested in the crowd. As soon as the ceremony is over, he turns and walks away without another word to her. Leyla watches him go, feeling a pang of disappointment. Perhaps she had been naive to think that he would recognize her efforts or care about her victory. After all, he is the Sultan, and she is just a lowly gardener. Still, she can't help but wonder if he saw the same wonder in the tulip that she did, if he saw the beauty and potential that she and Cornelius had nurtured for so long. In the days that follow, Leyla tries to put the festival behind her and focus on her work. But she can't shake the feeling that something is missing. The victory she had worked so hard for hasn't brought her the happiness she had expected. Maybe it was the way the Sultan had brushed off her, or maybe it was the realization that her life was still the same as it had always been. Whatever the reason, she feels a deep sense of dissatisfaction and longs for something more. One evening, as Leyla is tending to her plants in the greenhouse, she hears a knock on the door. She wipes her hands on her apron and opens the door to find a tall, slender man standing in the doorway. He's dressed in fine clothes, and his face is handsome, but it's his eyes that captivate Leyla the most. They're warm and friendly and seem to sparkle with amusement. "I hope I'm not interrupting your work," he says with a charming smile. "I'm here to see Cornelius, the head gardener." Leyla hesitates for a moment, not sure what to say or do. She's never met anyone like this man before. He seems confident and worldly, and Leyla feels a sudden self-consciousness about her appearance and her surroundings. But before she can say anything, the man steps inside and looks around the greenhouse with interest. "Your garden is beautiful," he says, his eyes lighting up. "I heard rumors of Cornelius's skills, but I didn't believe them until I saw this with my own eyes. You must be very proud." Leyla blushes and looks down at her feet. "It's not me," she says quietly. "I'm just a lowly gardener's assistant. I don't know much about plants." The man raises an eyebrow and looks at her with a curious expression. "Don't be modest," he says gently. "I saw you at the festival. You have a gift for this, just as Cornelius does. Your tulip was the most beautiful bloom of them all." Leyla's eyes widen in surprise. She had almost forgotten about the festival, let alone the man's presence. She looks up at him, her cheeks flushed with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispers. The man smiles warmly and introduces himself as Arman, a merchant from a faraway land. He explains that he had heard about the great festival of tulips and decided to come and see it for himself. He had no idea that Leyla and Cornelius were the ones who had grown the winning tulips. And when he learned of their story, he became determined to meet them. Leyla feels a warmth spread through her chest as she listens to him talk about his travels and his love for gardening. He's funny and charismatic, and Leyla finds herself laughing and engaging with him easily. For the first time in a long time, Leyla feels truly happy. She forgets about her worries and her doubts and just enjoys the moment. As the night goes on, Arman tells Leyla about his plans to start a garden in his home city and asks for her advice. Leyla listens patiently, offering suggestions and encouragement. She realizes that she loves sharing her knowledge and helping others, and she can't help but feel a sense of pride in her skills. Finally, as the night draws to a close, Arman stands up to leave. He thanks Leyla for her hospitality and tells her that he enjoyed meeting her. Leyla feels a pang of disappointment as he leaves, and she watches him go, wondering if she'll ever see him again. The next morning, Leyla wakes up early and heads to the greenhouse. She's excited to start a new project, but she can't shake the memory of Armand's visit the night before. She wonders if he'll come back and if he'll visit again. Suddenly, she hears a loud crash and turns to see Cornelius standing next to a broken pot, his face pale and drawn. "Cornelius, are you all right?" she asks, rushing to his side. Cornelius looks up at her, his eyes filled with despair. "It's my tulips," he whispers, his voice trembling. "They're dying. The soil, it's not right. I don't know what to do." Leyla's heart sinks as she looks at the wilting plants. She knows that this is serious and that Cornelius is in trouble. If his tulips die, he'll lose his position as head gardener and the empire will be left without its most important source of flowers. But Leyla isn't going to let that happen. She's determined to save Cornelius and the empire's tulips, and she knows just what to do. Leyla awoke to the scent of rain and the sound of discontent. The streets outside her small shop in the heart of Istanbul were alive with the shouts of angry merchants. Their protest echoed off the high walls of Sultan Ahmed's opulent palace, a place Leyla had never seen but had heard so much about, especially in the last few months. It had been 5 years since the Sultan's wife, the beautiful and refined Safi, had discovered the exquisite tulips of Western Asia and brought them to the court. And in the 5 years since then, the city had changed. Gardens had sprung up everywhere, full of flowers the likes of which people had never seen before. Bursting forth in hues of pink and yellow and red, they dotted the landscape around the city and even climbed the hillsides, sweeping down into the Bosporus like an artist's watercolor. The citizens of Istanbul reveled in their beauty, and it seemed for a moment that the world was new and bright. But now, the very same gardens were causing trouble. In fact, some said they were the reason for all the trouble. The merchants protested the exorbitant taxes they had to pay when they crossed the bridges into the city. Taxes levied by the palace to help pay for the ever-growing number of tulip gardens. More and more edicts were coming from the Sultan, restricting where people could plant bulbs, what colors they could grow, and even how many gardens a person could have. Some of the harshest laws concerned those who lived near the palace. Not only were they forbidden from growing tulips at all, lest they cast envious eyes upon the royal gardens, but they also had to pay extra taxes just for existing. It was becoming impossible to make a living there, and many were leaving, selling their homes and moving away. As Leyla watered the seedlings in her shop, she thought of her friend Zara. She sold carpets in the Grand Bazaar, one of the largest and most important trading centers in the city. Since the edict forbidding the sale of tulips within the bazaar's walls went into effect, business had been bad. Her carpets were lovely, Leyla knew, but they weren't nearly as lovely as tulips in bloom. People weren't buying much of anything anymore. And it wasn't just because of the edicts. There was something else, something darker, stirring beneath the surface of the city. Rumors spread like wildfire through the crowded streets. Whispers of discontent and rebellion, even talk of assassination. The people complained bitterly about the Sultan's profligacy and his advisors. And they blamed the gardens, too, saying they cost the Sultan dearly and left him with little money for his duties. They said the treasury was empty, that the taxes were too high, and that the Sultan and his wife would ruin the empire if they were uncareful. And then there were the foreigners. Ever since the gardens became the talk of the town, diplomats from every corner of the known world had come to see them for themselves. Leyla had seen Russians and Germans, French and English, all gaping at the exotic blooms and marveling at the colors. But they weren't just here to admire the flowers. Leyla knew they were gathering intelligence, listening to the people's complaints, and passing them along to their masters back home. For some of the disgruntled subjects of the Sultan, these foreigners were like a beacon of hope. Here were outsiders who understood their plight, who sympathized with their losses and encouraged them in their anger. Leyla couldn't help but feel uneasy at the thought of these pale-faced interlopers meddling in the affairs of a powerful empire, poking and prodding until they found a weak spot they could exploit. Each day when she opened her shop, Leyla hoped the skies wouldn't be filled with smoke and the air with the smell of gunpowder. But each morning she woke to the same unrest, the same rumors and the same fears. One blustery afternoon, as Leyla sorted through the piles of freshly dug soil in her shop, a customer approached her counter. His face was lined and weathered like the wood she used for her plant boxes, and his eyes were filled with worry. "Good afternoon," she said, trying to offer him a smile. But it faltered when she saw the troubled look on his face. "What can I do for you?" "I need your help, Leyla." He leaned closer to her and lowered his voice. "Word has reached me that you have a friend in the palace. Someone who can get us rare bulbs from the royal gardens." Leyla frowned. This was dangerous. She knew, but she liked a challenge. "Show me what you have, and we'll talk about it." When the man spread out his wares on the table, Leyla felt her breath catch. There were lilies and hyacinths, sure, but mixed among them were two tulips. One was the purest white, with petals like burnished gold, and the other had petals the color of fresh blood. They were unlike any tulips Leyla had ever seen. More elegant, more refined. These must be the rarest flowers in the city, she thought. The old man sighed and said, "These are my last. I've been selling bulbs from my garden for weeks now, sending what I can to my family in the countryside. They need food and supplies, and I can't give them much from what I earn here. But I want to send them something beautiful, something to remind them of Istanbul and the better times before the garden took over everything." Leyla looked at the flowers, then back at the old man. She wanted to help him. She did, but she knew it was risky business dealing with palace informants. What if they were caught? Then what would happen to the old man, to his family, to her? The answer came quickly enough. That night, Leyla dreamed of storm clouds over Istanbul. When she awoke, her shop was gone. The air in the city was thick with anxiety, heavy with the smell of roasting chestnuts. Leyla pulled her cloak tighter about her shoulders and hurried through the narrow streets. Winter was coming, and she had work to do. Her prized tulip bulbs had to be planted, their roots woven through the trellis in the palace garden before the snow fell. But lately, there were far more pressing matters on her mind than planting tulips. Her father's brother, her beloved Uncle Aziz, had come to visit from the palace gardens there at the citadel. He'd arrived bearing news that made her heart plummet like a stone. An official decree had been handed down from the Sultan's court ordering the sale of all palace gardens, including the citadel gardens, to raise funds for building stronger border defenses against the Russians. Everything must be auctioned off to the highest bidder, including trees, shrubs, and yes, even those precious tulip bulbs that had taken years to perfect. She had to do something, anything, to save them. She burst through her front door and into the small entry hall. Her mother sat on the daybed sewing, her lips moving soundlessly. "Mother, have you heard?" she cried out. Her mother's head snapped up and she stared at Leyla in alarm. "What is it, my love? What's wrong?" "They're going to take the greenhouse," Leyla whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. "All the work we've done will be for nothing." Her mother set down her needle, her face clouding over. For a moment she said nothing, but Leyla could feel the gears turning in her head. Her mother was practical, a survivor who'd endured many hardships during their years in Constantinople. She'd always taught Leyla that if your circumstances change, adapt and overcome. If you don't, you fall behind. Leyla threw herself onto the daybed next to her mother. I can't bear the thought of losing everything now. What will become of us? We will find a way, her mother said softly, placing a hand on hers. As we always do, but we need a plan. A good plan. Leyla sniffed back her tears and nodded. In the end, they decided that the best course of action was to ask her uncle for help. So that evening, when her uncle came to visit again, Leyla and her mother confronted him with their plan. He listened patiently to their proposition, then nodded slowly. You would hide the bulbs in clay pots, bury them in the ground around the palace, then wait until after the auction to dig them up and bring them here to plant in our garden. It may just work, he said finally, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. But how will we manage to carry so many bulbs out of the palace undetected? Leyla asked. That, my dear niece, is where you will need to be clever, her uncle said, winking at her. There are some very big clay pots in the storeroom near the greenhouse. Pots that hold dozens of small ones inside. And the lids fit perfectly over the top once the pots are placed inside. They look just like ordinary clay pots, except they're a bit heavier. You must slip the bulbs into these smaller pots, then nestle them all inside the larger pots, burying them in straw or sawdust. Take some soil with you and plant them here. Do you understand? Leyla's eyes widened and she felt a thrill shoot through her body. Yes, uncle, thank you so much. I won't let you down, she promised, reaching out and squeezing his hand. That night, after everyone had gone home, she snuck back into the palace with 2 sacks slung over her shoulder. Each sack held several large clay pots. With the greenhouse keys clutched tightly in her hand, she made her way to the storeroom, her heart hammering against her ribs. She could still turn back, hide the bulbs in the palace, and preserve her freedom. But the thought of her prize flowers being chopped up by those same axes, sold to the highest bidder and displayed in some rich merchant's garden made her shiver. No, she couldn't bear that. Besides, it was too late. She couldn't turn back now. She had come too far. The storeroom was dark and dank, smelling of mildew and dust. A single ray of moonlight sliced through a crack in the boarded-up window, illuminating motes dancing in the stale air. She could hear the distant cawing of a crow and the rustling of mice skittering across the floor. Her hand tightened around the keys in her pocket. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. Then she got to work. One by one, she carried the heavy pots out of the storeroom and into the greenhouse. The floor was littered with broken glass and dead plants, remnants of the work that had already been done, sold and carted away. Carefully, she placed each pot on a table near the workbench and got to work removing the bulbs. First, she washed them in cold water, then peeled off the brown outer leaves until she was left holding a single green shoot. She tied the roots in a bundle, slipped them into the smaller clay pot, then buried them in sawdust. She repeated this process until every pot was full. When she turned to grab another bulb, she noticed a figure standing in the doorway. Her blood ran cold. Someone was there who had seen her. What would they tell the guards? Would they cut off her fingers for stealing the Sultan's property? Panic welled up inside her, threatening to choke her. Then she forced herself to breathe deeply and slowly, willing herself to be brave. When the guard saw her, he gasped and took a step back. Startled, "I didn't mean to intrude, Leyla," he stammered. "I just wanted to see what was going on because you were making so much noise. Is everything all right?" "Of course," she replied, forcing a smile onto her face. "I'm just finishing up here." "Well, if you're sure," he said, scratching his beard. "I won't bother you any further. Just be careful, Leyla. There are many dangers in these crumbling walls." He tipped his head in a slight bow and turned to leave. As soon as the door had closed behind him, she let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She quickly finished packing the last of the bulbs, then hurried to get everything out of the greenhouse. She carried the pots to the storeroom and hid them behind some barrels. Finally, she crept back to the greenhouse and locked it up, stuffing the key into her pocket. The next morning, soldiers and merchants roamed through the gardens, counting the trees and shrubs, measuring flower beds, and taking stock of the plants that remained. By the time Leyla arrived, most of the valuable bulbs and tubers had already been taken. Still, she managed to slip several small bulbs out of the garden and into her cloak, hiding them under her shawl. She found her uncle Aziz by the fountain in the courtyard. His face was drawn and haggard, his shoulders slumped. He looked defeated. "Did you have any luck?" he asked her quietly. "Not much," she admitted, unfurling her shawl and revealing the small patch of dirt clinging to her cloak. "I found these, though they weren't in the garden, but I think they might be worth something." Her uncle reached out and examined the bulbs carefully. "Ah, these are lilan," he breathed. "The rarest of the rare, perfect specimens. The Sultan himself has been searching for these. To have them here in my hands, it's a dream come true." He looked up at her, his eyes shining. "With these, we will be able to buy enough land for a garden of our own. We will plant a new greenhouse filled with tulips of all colors, shapes, and sizes." Just then, a guard approached them, his face grim. "Aziz Bey," he said sharply, "you have been reassigned to the Sultan's personal gardens. Report to the palace gates by nightfall with your belongings packed." Her uncle stiffened, then nodded curtly and turned to her. "Take care of yourself, Leyla. Godspeed," he said, and with that, he hurried away. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the courtyard, Leyla walked through the archway leading to the gardens. Behind her, the sound of axes rang out, echoing through the darkening sky. In her arms, she carried hope in the form of fragile green shoots, the promise of spring and the memory of a bygone era. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Your support means the world to me. Now leave a comment below and tell me what you think is going to happen next in Leyla's story. I'll see you next time. The air is sweet with the scent of rain on dry soil, a promise whispered on the wind that stirs the pendulums of 1,000 blooming tulips. Their velvet cheeks flushed with the sunrise, unfurling secrets only the dawn can see. The gardener's legacy lives on in Leyla's modest estate, nestled along the Bosphorus, a world away from the clamor of the Grand Bazaar and the Sultan's gilded cage. Here, heirloom lines she salvaged from the imperial gardens flourish in her care, each bloom a silent ode to a bygone era. Years have etched their wisdom on Leyla's face, her eyes now pools of deep amber reflecting a lifetime spent in pursuit of perfection. Her fingers, once nimble and quick, are slower now, guided by a lifetime of experience rather than youthful agility. But the reverence in her touch remains unchanged, an intimate understanding of the language of the land that only comes with patient observation and deep affection. Every seedling, every leaf, every bud entrusted to her care speaks to her in its own tongue, and she listens intently, adjusting her approach based on the whispers of the wind, the secrets of the soil, and the stories held within the rings of ancient trees. Her estate, though modest, is a sanctuary of tranquility. Stone walls, adorned with climbing roses, mark the boundary between her world and the bustling city beyond. Within, cobblestone paths meander through meticulously manicured gardens, leading visitors on a sensory journey that engages both the eye and the soul. Each corner she has designed reveals a different facet of nature's beauty, from the delicate dance of fountains and pools to the soothing murmur of trickling waterfalls. It is a testament to the enduring power of nature and the quiet dignity of a life lived in harmony with the rhythms of the earth. As the sun climbs higher in the sky, its golden gaze sweeping across the landscape, Leyla's thoughts drift to the tumultuous years under the tyrannical rule of the last sultan. Vivid memories stir within her like half-forgotten dreams. The grandeur of the Topkapi Palace, the vibrant hues of the imperial gardens, and the haunting echoes of laughter and intrigue linger in her reminiscences, a bittersweet symphony that underscores the transient nature of power and the enduring allure of beauty. Amidst the sprawling gardens, travelers from distant lands seek solace and marvel at the exquisite blooms. They come not knowing they once graced the imperial pavilions during the glory days of the Ottoman Empire, unaware that they are standing in the presence of living history. Leyla watches them with a gentle smile gracing her lips, her heart filled with a mixture of pride and nostalgia. In their admiration, she sees a reflection of the empire's grandeur and the timeless elegance of the flowers she has devoted her life to preserving. For many, a visit to this tranquil estate is a mere stopover on their way to Istanbul's bustling markets or the city's historic mosques. For others, it is a pilgrimage of sorts, a chance to escape the chaos of modern life and immerse themselves in the serenity of nature. Leyla welcomes them all with open arms, sharing the stories of each blossom as if they were old friends, catching up over a shared pot of fragrant Turkish tea. Her voice, though weathered by time, carries the music of 1,000 blooming tulips, each word a brushstroke painting vivid pictures of the garden's rich history. Amongst her admirers is a young woman named Peri, whose thirst for knowledge burns brightly. With each passing day, she delves deeper into the art of tulip cultivation, her enthusiasm a bright flame that warms Leyla's heart. Under Leyla's patient guidance, she learns the delicate balance of nurturing the bulbs, the precise timing of planting, and the nuanced techniques to coax the most exquisite blooms from the soil. It is a tradition that has been passed down through generations. An oral history that finds its home in the calloused hands and sun-kissed faces of those who tend the land. With gentle hands and a keen eye, Leyla teaches Peri how to read the subtle signs of nature, how to interpret the language of the land and the whispers of the wind. She imparts the wisdom that has been etched onto her very being through years of communion with the soil, the secrets of coaxing the most exquisite blooms from the earth. As Peri absorbs these teachings, Leyla sees a reflection of her younger self, the same eagerness, the same thirst for knowledge shining in Peri's eyes. It is a legacy that transcends the art of gardening, touching the very essence of what it means to be human. Leyla's bond with the land is not merely a professional relationship. It is a profound partnership born out of mutual respect and deep affection. She understands that the land has its own rhythm, its own language, and she takes the time to learn its secrets. This communion with nature is not just a source of livelihood for Leyla, it is the very essence of her being. It is a testament to the idea that true mastery comes not from domination, but from understanding and harmony with the natural world. As the sun begins its slow descent, casting long shadows across the landscape, Peri turns to Leyla, her face reflecting the hues of the twilight sky. Her questions are not just about the technical aspects of gardening, but also about the soul of the craft, the reverence for nature that has become Leyla's guiding light. Leyla, in turn, finds joy in being able to share not just her knowledge, but also her passion, ensuring that the legacy of the master gardener continues to bloom. Leyla's journals have become a thing of legend, sought after by scholars and enthusiasts alike. Bound in leather stained by the vibrant hues of tulips, they hold more than just meticulous records of planting and techniques. Each entry is a window into the heart and soul of a woman deeply in love with her craft. Within their pages, Leyla's script, elegant and precise, details not just the science of cultivating the perfect bloom, but also the poetry of it. The journals are more than just a horticultural record. They are a testament to the power of human connection, whispering tales of resilience, love, and loss, each stroke of the pen echoing the quiet strength that has seen her through the darkest of times. To those who stumble upon these journals, whether in the bustling bazaars or the hushed libraries, they are relics of a bygone era, tangible links to a time when the Ottoman Empire was at its zenith. The very ink seems to shimmer with the spirit of the tulips themselves, their vibrant essence seeping through the paper and capturing the essence of an age of opulence and refinement. One day, a renowned scholar seeking to unravel the secrets of the Ottoman Empire's famed gardens stumbles upon Leyla's humble estate, drawn by the reputation of the master gardener. He hopes to find answers in the tranquility of her gardens and the wisdom etched onto Leyla's face. He seeks not just knowledge, but an understanding of the culture and refinement that once flourished under the shade of the great Ottoman trees. The scholar, with his inquiring mind and thirst for knowledge, becomes another student in Leyla's garden. He sits at her feet, not literally, of course, but figuratively speaking, eager to absorb her wisdom. Leyla, ever the patient teacher, finds joy in sharing her knowledge, realizing that each seeker brings a unique perspective and contributes to the ongoing dialogue with nature that has defined her life. And so the legacy of the master gardener continues to grow, nurtured by the devotion of one woman and shared with anyone who seeks to understand the language of the land. In the heart of Istanbul, amidst the echoes of history and the allure of the exotic, Leyla's humble estate stands as a beacon of tranquility. It is a place where the past whispers through the blooms, where the present finds solace in the garden's embrace, and where the future is written in the language of the land itself. Just as the tulips have endured, adapting and blooming anew each year, so too does Leyla's spirit, resilient and steadfast in the face of time's gentle passage. Her story is a testament to the enduring power of nature, the constancy of love, and the quiet dignity of a life well lived. The sunlight filters down through the leaves of the old walnut tree, dappling the ground in shifting patterns of light and shade. It's been 32 years since Leyla arrived in this village, 32 years since the fall of the Ottoman Empire, and today her garden is more extensive than ever, filled with tulips of every color imaginable, their petals unfurling like precious jewels beneath the sun. Here in the hills of a small Anatolian town, far from the intrigues and exiles of Istanbul, Leyla finally feels at peace. She runs her fingers over the velvety petals of a crimson tulip, its edges edged with black. This is the Sultan's favorite variety, at least it was when he was alive. Leyla remembers how he used to pace the marble floors of the palace, waiting impatiently for the first blooms of the season. Back then, it was believed that the tulips had healing powers, and the Sultan was desperate for a cure for the illness that ravaged his empire. Leyla closes her eyes, leaning against the rough bark of the walnut tree. So many years have passed since then. So much blood has been spilled in the name of those flowers. She can still remember the manicured gardens of the imperial palace, the rows upon rows of tulips planted in geometric patterns, each one a perfect specimen. It was there that Leyla first met the Sultan, whose piercing gaze and quick wit captivated her heart. She was just a lowly gardener's daughter, but he saw something in her, a quick mind and a green thumb. He took her under his wing, teaching her everything he knew about cultivating the perfect tulip. And what a strange world it was. the world of the imperial gardeners. There were rules for everything. The petals had to be the size of the new moon. The stems had to be straight and unblemished, and the colors had to be true. If a tulip was too pale or too dark, it was banished from the gardens forever. The gardeners lived in fear of the Sultan's whims, for he was a man of extremes. When he loved a color, every tulip had to be that color. When he turned 40, every tulip in the empire had to be edged with black, like the wrinkles around his eyes. But the Sultan also had a playful side. He would sneak into the gardens at night and replant the tulips, mixing the colors and the varieties until the whole place looked like a painter's palette. Then the palace gardeners would have to work through the night to sort them all out again. Leyla remembers how they would laugh as they worked. The soft glow of oil lamps lighting their faces, the scent of damp earth and wet wool heavy in the air. Those were carefree days. Days before the petals turned into a symbol of power and the gardens into a battleground. For it was the French ambassador who first noticed that the Ottoman tulips were not like any tulips he had seen before. They were bigger, bolder, more colorful, and he took cuttings back to Europe where, with a little bit of French know-how, they became the height of fashion. Soon, every wealthy European wanted an Ottoman tulip in their garden. And so the Sultan began to hoard the bulbs, controlling the trade and using the revenue to build up his army. But it wasn't just the money. The Sultan truly believed that the tulips gave him special powers, powers to heal the sick and protect his empire. He appointed Leyla as head gardener, responsible for breeding ever new varieties of tulips, each one more spectacular than the last. And while she loved the challenge, she also saw the darkness that was creeping into the palace walls. For as the Sultan's obsession with the tulips grew, so did his paranoia. He suspected everyone around him, his viziers, his generals, even his wife. And he tasked Leyla with uncovering their plots, claiming that her tulips could reveal a person's thoughts. If a visitor picked a red tulip, they must love the Sultan. If they picked a yellow one, they were indifferent. And if they picked a blue one, they were a spy. One day, the Sultan summoned Leyla to his private chambers. His face was pale and drawn, his eyes blazing with manic energy. "I need your help," he said, his voice hoarse. "There is a traitor in my court, and only you can find them." He handed her a silver trowel and a velvet pouch filled with black tulip bulbs. "Plant these in the royal gardens," he instructed. "And when the time is right, you will know who the traitor is." Leyla took the trowel and the pouch, her heart heavy with dread. As she walked away, she could hear the Sultan's voice echoing through the palace. "Find the traitor. Find the traitor." Days turned into weeks, and Leyla toiled in the gardens. She planted the black tulips, but they refused to bloom. The sun beat down on the parched earth, and the flowers wilted in the heat. Every day, the Sultan sent for her, demanding to know who the traitor was. But Leyla couldn't tell him. The tulips weren't blooming. Then one night, a storm rolled in, a violent wind that tore through the palace gardens. When Leyla arrived the next morning, she found the garden in ruins, all of her hard work destroyed in a single night. And among the debris, she saw the black tulips, their petals unfurled, revealing not a sign of a traitor, but the Sultan's own reflection staring back at him. He had been the traitor all along, she realized, destroying his own empire in his obsession with the tulips. And in that moment, she knew that the only way to stop him was to take the secret to her grave. So Leyla fled the city, leaving behind the life she once knew. She traveled south, eventually reaching a small village nestled in the hills. Here, no one cared about the color of the tulips or the politics of the palace. Leyla started a small farm, growing wheat and vegetables, but always tulips. For her, the flowers were more than just a means of power or a symbol of wealth. They were a connection to the past, to a time when the world was full of wonder and possibility. It was here that Leyla met Mehmet, a handsome young shepherd with eyes as green as the spring grass and a smile as warm as the summer sun. They fell in love quickly, and soon they were married, their love as eternal as the hills that surrounded them. Together, they raised 2 children, a boy and a girl, and for a while, Leyla thought she might actually be able to put the past behind her. But one day, the memories came flooding back. The palace guards arrived in the village, searching for Leyla, asking everyone if they had seen her, but no one had. They had no idea who she was. The villagers had never seen a woman so beautiful, so sad, and so the palace guards left, and Leyla was able to stay hidden in the village, tending to her garden and raising her family. But the quiet life didn't last forever. For one day, Leyla heard the distant rumble of drums, the clash of steel on steel. The Ottomans were at war again, and this time they were winning. Soon, soldiers arrived in the village, looking for supplies. One of them found Leyla's garden and, entranced by the colors, asked her to come with him to the Sultan. Leyla resisted, but the soldiers were insistent. She had to see what the Sultan wanted. When Leyla arrived at the palace, she saw that it was a shadow of its former self. The walls were crumbling, the carpets threadbare, and sitting on a rickety wooden throne was an old man, his eyes filled with a haunted look. "You haven't changed at all," he said, his voice raspy with age. "Your tulips are still the most beautiful in the empire." "My Sultan," Leyla replied, bowing her head. "I need your help," he said, reaching out a trembling hand. "We're losing the war, and I need you to make me a special tulip, one that will give me the strength to win." Leyla hesitated. She knew that the Sultan was mad, that he was living in the past, but something in his eyes made her take his hand. Maybe it was pity, maybe it was fear, but she agreed to help him. And so Leyla returned to the palace, this time to a small, neglected garden. The weeds had taken over, and the few tulips that were left were stunted and sickly. But Leyla didn't care. She dug in the dirt with her bare hands, planting her own bulbs and watering them with water from the nearby stream. Day after day, she toiled in the garden, and slowly, miraculously, the tulips began to bloom. They were the most beautiful Leyla had ever seen, their petals unfurling in shades of scarlet and gold, their stems straight and strong. The Sultan watched her work, a small smile playing on his lips. But Leyla knew that the smile was a mirage, that the Sultan was still trapped in his own past, still grasping at the glory of the Ottoman Empire. And she also knew that the war was lost. The Russians were coming. When the palace fell and the Sultan was forced to flee, Leyla stayed behind, hiding in the garden. She had nothing left to lose. So, when the palace was looted and burned, she stayed among the ashes, watching the flames dance in the twilight sky. As the fire died down, Leyla stood up, brushing the soot off her clothes. The garden was ruined, but from the ashes, something new was beginning to grow. A single tulip bulb pushed its way through the dirt, unfurling a single white petal toward the fading light. Leyla knelt down beside it, her heart aching with a strange mixture of grief and hope. The petal was perfect, she thought, and in that moment, she knew that the legacy of the Ottoman tulips would live on, even if the empire itself was gone.